I've studied every major empire that ever collapsed, and right now, America looks exactly like all of them did, right before the end. I'm not saying this to scare you. I'm saying this because the data is undeniable, and I've spent 50 years reading data for a living. My name is Ray Dalio. I founded Bridgewater Associates, the largest hedge fund on earth. I've managed money through crashes, recessions, wars, and currency collapses. I've sat across the table from heads of state. I've watched financial systems buckle in real time. And I am telling you right now, what is happening in America is not a blip. It is not a political problem that will be fixed after the next election. It is a structural breakdown, a debt cycle reaching its terminal phase. And most people have absolutely no idea. Here's what I've learned after studying 500 years of economic history. Every great empire, the Dutch, the British, the Romans, followed the same arc. They rose on innovation and discipline. They expanded through trade and military dominance. And then, slowly, then all at once, they began spending more than they earned. They borrowed to fund wars. They printed money to cover debt. They told their citizens everything was fine, until it wasn't. America is not immune to this cycle. No country ever has been. Right now, the United States carries over $38 trillion in national debt. That number is so large it has lost all meaning for most people. So let me give you a different frame. Imagine a family, decent income, nice house, 2 cars, but every single month they spend more than they make, not by a little, by a lot. So they put it on credit cards. Then they take out a second mortgage. Then they borrow from relatives. Then they refinance. And the whole time they keep telling themselves, we'll figure it out later. That family is America, and later is now. The federal government is spending roughly $2 trillion more per year than it collects in taxes. That gap has to be filled somehow. So it borrows. It issues treasury bonds. And when demand for those bonds starts to dry up, and it is drying up, it turns to the Federal Reserve. And the Fed does what it always does in this situation. It prints. When you print money, you don't create wealth. You dilute it. Every dollar already in existence becomes worth slightly less. It's like watering down soup and charging the same price. The bowl looks full, but there's less in it. This is called inflation. But what's happening now isn't just normal inflation. It's the beginning of what I call a debt monetization spiral. The government owes too much to pay back honestly, so it pays back dishonestly in cheaper dollars. And your savings, your salary, your retirement account, through the soup getting watered down. Now here's where most people get it wrong. They think this is a future problem, something for economists to argue about, something Congress will eventually fix. They're wrong. This is not a forecast. This is not a projection. This process has already begun. The dollar has lost over 20% of its purchasing power in just the last 4 years. Interest payments on the national debt are now the single largest line item in the federal budget, larger than defense, larger than Medicare. America is paying interest on interest. It is in a debt trap, and debt traps don't resolve themselves quietly. They resolve through inflation, through currency devaluation, through financial repression, where governments quietly manipulate the system to pay back less than they borrowed in real terms, sometimes to outright default. Every empire that hit this wall faced the same brutal menu of options. None of them are painless. All of them transfer wealth from people who don't understand what's happening to people who do. Which side of that transfer do you want to be on? Because here's the part nobody tells you. These cycles don't end with a dramatic crash that everyone sees coming. They end with a slow erosion, a quiet theft. You look up one day and your money buys less. Your standard of living has slipped. The opportunities you assumed would be there aren't. That's not doom. That's history, repeating itself again. So the question isn't whether this is happening. The question is, what do you do about it? So now you know the pattern. The debt is real. The cycle is real. The erosion has already started, and sitting still, doing nothing, is itself a decision. It's just a very expensive one. I've spent my career studying what happens to wealth during these transitions, not in theory, in practice. I've watched currencies collapse in real time. I've seen middle class savings wiped out not by a crash, but by a slow, invisible bleed. And I've watched a small group of people, people who understood what was happening, come out the other side not just intact, but stronger. The difference between those two groups wasn't luck. It wasn't connections. It wasn't even intelligence. It was positioning. Let me be direct with you. When a government is drowning in debt and begins to monetize that debt, when it starts printing to survive, cash becomes a trap. Holding dollars feels safe. It feels responsible. It feels like the adult thing to do. But in a devaluation cycle, cash is a melting ice cube. Every day you hold it, it shrinks. Not dramatically, not in a way that triggers alarm, just quietly, consistently, relentlessly, smaller. So what do? First, you stop thinking in dollars. Start thinking in purchasing power. The question is never how much money do I have? The question is, what can this money actually buy? Those are two very different questions. And right now, the gap between them is widening every single month. Second, you get out of paper and into real things, hard assets, things that hold value and currencies don't. I'm talking about gold, real estate, commodities, productive land. These aren't relics of a paranoid past. They are the time-tested anchors that every civilization has returned to when paper money failed. Gold, specifically. I know how that sounds. I know some of you just rolled your eyes. You think gold is for doomsday preppers, for people who don't trust the system. Here's the truth. I don't fully trust the system right now, and neither should you. Not because I'm pessimistic, because I'm paying attention. Gold has preserved wealth across 5,000 years of human history. It survived the fall of Rome. It survived the Weimar Republic. It survived every currency crisis in between. It doesn't pay a dividend. It doesn't compound. So when everything else is being inflated away, it holds its ground. That's not nothing. In a devaluation environment, that's everything. Third, you diversify globally. This one is hard for Americans because Americans are conditioned to believe there is no better place. And in many ways, that's still true. But when it comes to protecting wealth during a domestic debt crisis, concentration is the enemy. If all your assets are denominated in dollars inside the U.S. system, you are fully exposed to whatever the U.S. government decides to do next. And in a debt crisis, governments do things they swore they never would. They impose capital controls. They change tax laws overnight. They restructure obligations in ways that favor the borrower, which is them, and punish the saver, which is you. Spreading assets across currencies, across geographies, across systems, that's not disloyalty. That's survival. Fourth, and this one most people will ignore, because it requires the hardest thing of all, delayed gratification. Stop spending like the good times are permanent, because they're not. They never are. I've watched brilliantly talented people destroy their financial futures not through bad investments, but through lifestyle, through keeping up, through the quiet social pressure to look wealthy instead of being wealthy. Mozart was one of the greatest musical geniuses who ever lived. He died broke, not because he lacked talent, because he spent everything he earned and more. He lived for the applause of today and had nothing left for the reality of tomorrow. Don't be Mozart. Be the federal judge who lives in the same house for 30 years, drives a used car, and retires with generational wealth. Not because they earned more, because they understood something Mozart never did. That wealth is what you keep, not what you make. The window to act is not closed, but it is closing. Here's what I need you to understand. These debt cycles, these empire transitions, they don't announce themselves. They don't send a calendar invite. They arrive gradually. Then suddenly, and the people who prepared gradually, who repositioned quietly, who thought in decades, not quarters. Those people wake up on the other side of the crisis with their wealth intact. The people who waited for certainty, who needed one more sign, who told themselves they'd get serious about this next year. They become the cautionary tale. I've lived through enough cycles to know this is not the time for comfort. This is the time for clarity, where cold, disciplined, almost boring action, not panic, not paralysis, action. The storm I've been warning about for years, the one I mapped in principles for navigating big debt crises. It isn't coming. It's here. The only question left is the one only you can answer. Are you going to position yourself to survive it? Or are you going to be surprised by it? Because history doesn't care which one you choose. It just records the outcome.